This week we had the opportunity to interview Scott Chadwick, head coach, Clayton High School here in North Carolina. What are your thoughts of that one? I thought that was a great interview.
I thought it was good. I thought it was great. Scott's awesome. I had the opportunity to be part of his staff for a year, my short year of coaching football. And like, I learned a lot from him, just really about leadership and the way he goes about it. It's a very, like, I know we talked about it on the podcast, but the way he structures his practices, the way he is, like, his presence during his practices, he's a true professional, and his practices are run like to a T, very synchronized, very on schedule. And it does show, because I mean, the coaching with him, the one thing I noticed is, like, this dude has a plan for literally everything. He's fully prepared in every single scenario. And I think that comes with him doing it for as long as he has been. Like he said, he was the youngest high school football coach in the state of Maryland at 28 years old. And by 30 years old, he won his first state championship. And he said, like, this is before the trend of hiring young coaches was a thing. So I thought it was great. And I think they're on track to be just as successful as they were last year, this upcoming year.
Yeah, so last year he was saying that they were competing in state championship, and they fell short of that. And again, I agree with you. I thought that this interview was everything I was hoping for. And what I love more than anything is that his love for choosing a program that's struggling and wanting to turn things around, and his track record proves that. It seems like every single school he went into, he turned it around, and what he was focusing on was culture, the leadership, and teaching guys how to be accountable, having high standards, very much like the Nick Sabans. It's, high expectations, high standards, enforcing those. Great personality. Really enjoyed talking with him. You won't see this on the podcast, but I kind of opened up with saying, hey, I'm from Maryland too, and I knew he was from La Plata, and the only thing I knew about La Plata was that it had an F5 hurricane, or excuse me, F5 tornado, like 15 years ago or something like that, and he started laughing.
Where's La Plata at in Maryland?
Gosh, I couldn't even tell you. I want to say it's southern, but don't quote me on that. But hey, listen, there's more than that. They had another tornado, and that's Scott Chadwick coming out of Maryland. Again, just the embodiment of what you want to see as a coach and what I would expect as a coach. So a lot to unpack in this interview. Definitely, for those who are thinking about coaching, who are already currently involved in coaching, this is definitely one to check out. Just to kind of open it up, if you want to just kind of touch on your background, and maybe if there was a pivotal role in your background that really helped you the most to prepare for the job at Clayton, what really kind of taught you the most about being a head coach?
Well, I grew up, my background and that part kind of starts in the same spot. And that is, I grew up in a family where my father was a high school football coach. So I don't know what it's like to have a fall where high school football is not, the main part of your life. I as far back as I remember, I was involved with high school football. My dad was a coach. He became a head coach, I think, when I was 9. So I was around it my whole life. And I was very fortunate to be around good assistant coaches. My father had really good, hardworking, dedicated assistant coaches. So I got modeled by those men on what it looked like to be good assistant coaches, what it looked like to be, good teammates, because, we talk about leadership all the time. You can't be a leader if you don't have any followers. And I learned from those guys what it meant to be a good follower. And I was also, very fortunate that I became a head coach very early in my career.
That's what I was gonna say, because I remember you and I spoke a couple of years ago. Your first head coaching position, you were 24.
I was 28 actually.
28.
But that I joke all the time. That was before this current trend of hiring, young head coaches.
Yeah, that's because
that was back in 1998, I guess. At the
1998.
time, I was the youngest head coach in the state of Maryland.
In Bowie High School, 1998 to 2000.
And Bowie is at that time maybe the largest high school in the state of Maryland. And one of the main reasons I got that job was there were people that knew that, yes, I was inexperienced, but the time that I had spent growing up in a family, in a household of being a head coach, that was worth years of experience to them.
100%.
And one of the main people that worked at Bowie, the guy that was the dean of students there, knew my father and had coached against my dad, and knew that those years of being in a household was worth, several years of actual practical experience. And that's how I got the job. And, Bowie began for me what has become a career of basically taking over places where there hasn't been recent success and kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of transforming them. Bowie had I think Bowie had 10 straight losing seasons when I got there. And I quickly added 2 more to the streak. I tell people all the time, my first year as a head coach, we went 1-9. And we weren't really close to being 2-8. We were not very good. And we played in the Prince George's County 4A League. There were 8 teams in the league. And that year there were 28 Division I signees that came out of that conference. It was a very, very talented football conference.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And and I was very fortunate, though. We had a really, really good freshman class that came in there with me, and we gradually improved the program and gradually built the program. And then my 4th year there, we won the state championship.
That's what I was going to ask. So you were in the state championship a total of 4 times.
Yes.
And then you have 2 or 3 rings.
Just one.
One. Okay.
I'm 1-3 now. And yeah, we won in 2001.
Okay.
And I left after that, which, a lot of people wondering what I was thinking. I just built the program, probably could have run for mayor in the city of Bowie. And I left because I went back to Southern Maryland. So Bowie is right there in PG County, kind of just outside of Washington, D.C. And I went to Lackey High School, which is in Southern Maryland. Lackey's actually the high school I was zoned to go to when I was a kid. That's the neighborhood school I should have gone to. I went to La Plata with my dad just because my dad was there. But what had happened was a lot of the schools that were in Charles County where I grew up, they either had established head coaches that weren't going anywhere or guys that had just gotten there. So all of my dad's friends and all the people that taught me, and they told me, if you ever want to, come here and get a job, you got to take this job now because there's not going to be another opportunity for a long time. So that's why I ended up in Lackey. Where, again, situation wasn't as bad as it was at Bowie. But in my 2nd year there, we played for the state championship. And that was the first time they'd won a playoff game in 19 years. So it was another place that, hadn't had great recent success. We played for the state championship in 2003 and 2004, lost both of them. Played in the regional championship in 2005. And then I decided I was going to move south where high school football was more valued and supposedly paid more. And
Yeah. And then that's when you went down to Evans, Georgia.
Correct. I spent 2 years at Greenbrier High School in Georgia. I found the one area of Georgia that doesn't really value high school football. There is a place.
It exists.
It does exist. Yeah, I found the one area of Georgia that high school football is important, but it's no more important than anything else. And the school system made sure I was aware of that. I was the head football coach, the athletic director at a large high school in Georgia, and I taught 5 out of 8 classes. We had 8 classes. I taught 5. So I was teaching 5 classes, head football coach, athletic director, and I was killing myself.
Yeah, that's a 90, 100-hour week right there.
I was literally killing myself.
Yeah.
And basically what happened was my oldest son was in the 8th grade, my second year at Greenbrier. And I just really knew that was not going to be a sustainable situation for me. And Nathan Kamishek was my defensive coordinator in Maryland, and he left and moved to Charlotte while I was in Georgia. And he told me about this opening, this brand new school that had just opened just outside of Charlotte. He's like, man, it's a really good area. I think this will be a really good school. And that's how I ended up at Marvin Ridge, which at that time was again, we talk about this building process. This was a brand new school.
Brand new school, yeah.
So it was a brand new school, and I stayed there I was there for 6 years, coached both of my sons there, lived right there in Waxhaw where the school is. Really was in a great situation, but it's a great lesson as to when you're in leadership and you're married in good situations with the people above you. I had a great principal. Bill Cook and I had a great relationship. We had a lot of the same philosophies on leadership and on building kids and things like that. And during my 5th year there, he left and he took a job as an assistant superintendent. And they brought in a guy who, we did not share the same philosophies. Did not share the same philosophies on a lot of things. And so after my 6th year, which was my first year with him, he kind of decided that he needed to get his own person in there. And I think they won 2 games the next year after I left, and maybe 3 the year after that. So be careful what you wish for. But
Absolutely.
The best thing that happened, though, for me was that's how I ended up at Myers Park. And again, I got to Myers Park. They'd had 10 straight losing seasons when I got there. And then years 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, we won 48 games in those 4 years. We're nationally ranked twice, set the school record 3 times in that period for wins in a season. And I tell people, I would probably still be at Myers Park right now if COVID hadn't have happened.
Yeah, I remember you told me that a couple years ago.
Going into 2020, we were preseason, I think, in the top 50 in the country. We were scheduled to play on ESPN. We were scheduled to play on the NFL Network. We had a great schedule set up, and then COVID just kind of ruined it, and lost a lot of my players. We had players move to other states to play. All of our seniors early enrolled in college.
Yeah.
So that's how in January of 21, I left and went to the University of Maryland for a couple years. Learned a lot while I was there. Main thing I learned was that I belong in a high school. And that's basically how I ended up at Clayton. I ended up over here because all of my family that's from the DC area, we've all moved south. And most of my extended family, when they all moved south, ended up in the Raleigh area. So
Right.
when I was in Maryland and realizing I kind of needed to change, it was actually my wife was like, well, why don't we look over in the Raleigh area where most of our family is?
Right.
That's how I ended up at Clayton.
So a lot of, it seems to me that you love the building process. You love kind of coming into a situation where
I love it. It's just,
yeah.
it's just how I've ended up.
Well, it's like something like we always tell our teams that we work with. It's a sacrificial mindset. It's not going to be easy. Leadership is costly, right? It's going to take a lot of work. So I'm curious, aside from, some of the things that you can't control necessarily, where, the different classes that come in, but is there a secret sauce that you apply to these schools? Is there a set of rules, standards that, really kind of help you build that team? Just out of curiosity, out of all the experiences you've had, what are some of the secrets there?
Number one, there's kind of three things that I've put into place now every place I go. Number one, there's got to be a mission statement. There has to be a mission statement on what are we trying to do here? What is the goal of our program? What are we all here for? And I think when you have a mission statement, when you have an objective, everybody that comes within the program, everybody that comes in, everybody that plays in the program, the parents that send the kids there, they know this is what we're signing up for. This is what our mission statement is. This is what we're trying to do here. Same thing with coaches. Any coach that comes in that wants to be a part of the program, they know this is why we exist. And I think when you have a mission statement, when you have an objective, everybody knows what they're signing up for, number one. Number two, I think you need to have a set of core values. You need to have a set of core values that define, what it is you're trying to build. Also, what it is you're trying to make your kids into. For us, our core values, we have characters. One of our core values, we're trying to develop guys to have better character. Accountability is one of our core values. We're trying to teach kids how to be accountable. We have service. People understand when they're going to be in our program, we're going to give back to our community.
Yeah.
Commitment. People understand there's a certain commitment level that's expected, if they're going to be a part of our program. So there, between the mission statement and the core values, I really think you set the tone for what's expected of guys that are going to be in the program. And also it tells them what it is we're going to do for them and try to develop in them. And then the third thing we have is we have our set of standards. Basically, that's our operating procedures. And that could be anything from, first of all, number one in our standards is everybody needs to know the mission statement and needs to know the core values. We actually test our kids on it. We give them we give them quizzes on our mission statement and our core values so that we know that they know it. That's one of our standards, is that the core values and the mission statement. Then we have standards on how we're going to practice, what's expected of a player at practice, what's expected of a player in the community. Then we have little things like our meeting standards. Okay. Our meeting standards. Number one, be on time. Number two, don't have a hat on or a hood on in our meetings.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember.
So our standards are basically, that's kind of short for standard operating procedures, how we're going to operate.
Right.
And so those are the three things that, we pride ourselves on: the mission statement, the core values, and our standards of how we're going to operate. That's as close to a secret sauce, I think, as you get.
So I'm curious, and Joe, feel free to jump in from your experiences with the military here. But I love this. I love that you're talking. I love that you actually quiz the players. That is the first time I've heard that at the high school level, at least. So I commend you for that. That's highly respectful. Accountability is one of the things that we see as the biggest issue with high school teams, and honestly, probably with any team, college and pro. And so I'm just curious, what does the process look like? Is this something when you see a player is not living up to the standards, or this is a time where the coach needs to hold them accountable? Is this something where you take this on, or is this kind of a peer led by your leaders? Like, what does the governance structure kind of look like?
It's funny you talk about this. Is something we discussed in our leadership council meeting the other day. So we have a leadership council in the program, and I spend this time of year, February, March, April, So I train our leadership council. So our leadership council meetings this time of year, number one, we actually go back and we look at that mission statement and those core values, and do we need to tweak them? Do we need to adjust them? That's part of what we're doing now. The other part of what we're doing now is I'm training them to be leaders. We are actually doing leadership development. I don't like to just throw, oh, you're a leader, go ahead. No, we're going to equip them and teach them how to be leaders. Well, one of the things we talked about the other day was exactly what you just asked, and that is, we were very fortunate this year that we were as good as we were, and we were really more coach-led than we were player-led.
We were talking about that before you came on today. And when I was on your staff in 2023, that team was full of talent. I mean, it was, an unbelievable team. And watching the game against Cardinal Gibbons this year, you saw a huge shift. I mean, driving with a minute and a half left, I think Aiden Smalls threw the game-winning touch. I mean, the kid was covered.
Yeah.
Double covered, and it was defensive pass interference. And it was a great ball by the quarterback, and he catches it in the end zone. But the difference is like this year there was no doubt. And you could tell it from a consumer. I'm watching it. I'm like, man, these kids just their shoulders are square. They're on the field and they're going to play until they literally can't anymore and this is for the state championship. And you could tell that stems from coaches leading properly and developing properly. And it seemed like it was really beginning to really pay off, and you saw it as a consumer.
And, and I guess my point of that is we won in spite of, in the way I've always believed and the way I've always seen, the great teams are led by the players, and they're not led by the coaches. And we were fortunate that we kind of got away with it this year, without having great, and it was just the personality of the kids, didn't lend itself, and the coaches ended up kind of taking that role on, between myself and Bennett Jones, and we became a more of a coach-led team. And that's one of the things we've talked about in these meetings is we have to transform back to being, player-led. And when you talk about the accountability piece, the first layer of accountability has got to be with the peers. And the first layer of accountability has to be, hey, if somebody's not living up to what we expect of them and what our program expects of them, there has to be a player or a leader, somebody within that leadership council that is the one that kind of handles that first. I always say I'm kind of I don't want to say last resort, but look, there's going to be times when guys, just don't respond to that leadership, and that's where I come in. And generally that's probably not good for them if it gets to the point where I have to deal with it. And obviously there are certain things, these are high school kids. There's certain things that go on that I have to be the first line of defense,
right, for sure,
so to speak. But when it comes to the commitment level, the energy level, the work ethic level, that's really something we want the kids to kind of take the first layer of accountability on.
Go ahead, Joe. You were gonna say something?
Well, one thing, I never played D1. I never, and I never even really seen a practice. I did lightly because my son's godfather was at Kentucky for a little bit and then Miami. But when Damani was on your staff that year when he was coaching with secondary and special teams, I remember he had made the comment. He's like, this is the most professional high school practice that's ever been ran. So in forms of like leadership development, I think also you're developing the athletes to play at the next level as well. Like I could imagine a lot of individuals that have played for you go on to the next step, whether it's D1, D2, or D3, and they go into that program and there's obviously an adjustment period to get comfortable being in a new school with a new staff and college. But the way it's structured. That's what Damani was telling me. He's like, it's very similar, just script, everything's prepared. There's a flow, you know what you're going to do day in and day out, unless it's a walkthrough on a Thursday afternoon. Or in the case of like going into playoffs, playing on a Saturday. So I think that too separates, develops the kids to prepare for that next step.
Well, and I think that partially goes back to, the time I spent at the college level and being around, spring practices and being around obviously summer and in-season practices. And, I did learn a lot of good stuff there too. And I certainly picked up a lot of that. But also, I think it's also not being afraid to seek feedback. We're very fortunate that particularly during the spring recruiting period, we get a lot of college coaches that come watch our spring practices. And a lot of those guys that I trust and value their opinions, I just flat out ask them like, hey, tell me what you saw. What can we do from a practice standpoint better? What are some of the things you saw? I mean, I'll ask those guys.
Yeah.
And whether I'm trying to get feedback from things that we can do better, sometimes I'm just trying to get reinforcement that what we're doing, is good. And to your point earlier, I mean, most of the college coaches that come to our practices do say that, we run the best practices that they go to all spring.
Yeah. I mean, right. And I think it definitely doesn't go unnoticed. Like, even when
thankfully, I don't think our kids know any better. So they're going
to. Well, yeah. And that's exactly. So, it's
great leadership. Yeah.
Great leadership. And it makes it just run, smoother. I do have I've always wanted to ask you this. So when you come into a program and it's 0-10, they just have losing season, one after another, and you get hired on practice one, day one, like, where do you start?
Well, I want to make one thing clear, and that is, yes, I've taken over some places where success has not been there before I got there, but I was still picky about the places where I went to rebuild places. In other words, I knew that you could go in there and rebuild. When I took the job at Bowie, I asked some of those guys, some of the older coaches in Maryland who knew that area, who knew about it, and I got their opinion and said, hey, can you win there? And overwhelmingly, people that I trusted told me, absolutely, you can win there. When I went to Myers Park, when I went to Lackey, I didn't have to be. I grew up there. I knew I could win there. When I went to Myers Park, again, 10 straight losing seasons, but again, I'd been in the Charlotte area long enough. I knew enough people. I knew that was a sleeping giant. So I wasn't, I don't take just any rebuilding job. Like, I'm taking ones that I know that there's potential there. But, I think day one, practice one, I think first off, it's got to be high intensity. It's got to be demanding, because I think number one, and probably what I would call over demanding, probably tougher than a normal practice is going to be, because right away you've got to establish a tone and establish a standard of how we're going to practice, because you have to find out, who wants to be here, who really wants to be here, who wants to do this, and I think the other part of it is, from a schematic standpoint, the things that you're going to do differently, you got to kind of bring those out early, so that the kids know that, we're not going to keep doing the same things we've always done, which yield the same results. So, I mean, I think the things you're going to do differently have to be shown early. But I think, again, the most important thing is the intensity and the high demand of that practice has to be brought out right away.
So, Coach, yeah, I think this is something that a lot of coaches face. Especially maybe in the more of the smaller areas and where they're struggling to, struggling to have the talent coming in through the class, but they're faced with a situation sometimes where they have a great athlete on their hands, potential D1 prospect, but we have a little bit of an ego problem, and this particular player is not showing up for workouts during the off season. And not to say that this is any excuse, but one of the excuses we hear often is, well, so-and-so is playing lacrosse. So-and-so is playing baseball. So they want to focus on that, and no shame to them. But in this case, this player is just flat out not showing up. This is the booby miles, this is God-given talent. I don't need to do these things, that kind of thing. Now, if this is one of your best players, this is a difficult situation as a coach. And I'm just curious how you would handle that. And I know this is a tough question, but I feel like this is a question that a lot of coaches are faced. It's, how do I handle this? Is this something where this could poison the well and I just need to take a stand on this? And maybe I need to cut him from the program, and he can earn his way back in. I'm just curious of what your thoughts are on that.
Couple of layers to that. First off, the part about, well, they're playing lacrosse or playing baseball. We've never, ever discourage kids from playing other sports. So they are more than welcome to play as many sports as they want. Here are the parameters we have on that. It does not stop you from lifting weights. You're still required.
I love that.
So that does not excuse you from the weight room. And now that does sometimes it creates a little bit of work on the coach's part. Here at Clayton, it doesn't, because all of our football players have weight training class together every day. So our football players who play basketball or baseball, they're in the weight room every day already because they're in class. So
I remember that when you told me that, when I was in high school, we would do after school, and that's when after or before school, and that's when those issues really start to occur.
Correct.
But man, like, to get around that problem by, all right, here's what we're going to, and it's like just forecasting, like nipping it before it even happens. Like, you can play as much sports as you want.
Right.
However,
yeah,
this is going to be on your class schedule, and you're expected to weight train. And It's also a graded class.
So here it's not an issue here. I'll go back to when I was at Myers Park, and maybe about half our kids were in weight training during the day. So let's say you got 10 kids that are playing baseball or running track, and they're not in weight training class. All right, now what do you do? And again, that's where it creates a little bit of work for the coaches. So we would have workouts before school. Because again, you can stay after and lift, but if those kids got to go to baseball practice, go to lacrosse practice, then that doesn't do them any good either. So if we had kids that weren't in weight training class and played another sport, then they came in at 6 a.m. and lifted, or we had a coach that would come back at 5 o'clock in the evening and lift them after their practices were over. So you have to be creative. You have to be willing to put the work in, but that also keeps the accountability piece for the kid. There's no excuse.
There's no way you can get around it.
Exactly. There's no way around it. You have to be at one of these times to lift. So that's part of that commitment part. You have to be willing to lift. You have to be willing to be in the weight room. In the summer, again, you get guys that are, at lacrosse tournaments, or you get some of these baseball tournaments are like week long.
Yeah, they're long.
So you try to be, flexible. Our thing with the kids is, number one, obviously you need to be here every day, that you're not off with your other sport. Number two, we need to know where you are. Like I tell kids, the last thing I want is to be out there on a Monday at a summer workout in June and calling attendance, and somebody's not, and I have no idea why they're not there. That's not acceptable. The third thing is, when we start actual real football practice for good on July 31st or August 1st, that other sport is done. Like you're not playing, you're not playing your other sport. I'll give you, my son was my quarterback at Marvin Ridge, went on to play baseball at Coastal Carolina, was the captain of their national championship baseball team. So obviously baseball was a pretty big deal to him. he didn't touch a baseball from August to, January.
Yeah.
Right.
That's just how it was. So, you get guys that maybe football isn't quite their main sport, which, okay, but from August to however long we're playing, it is your main sport. So that's the only caveats we put on the other sports to kind of go back to, well, they're not committed, but they're your best players. The standard is the standard, and the standard is for everybody.
Yeah.
And that standard is for all the kids. And if they're not meeting that standard, they have to go. And I'll go back to my first year at Myers Park. I started that season with 29 seniors. I finished that season with 19 seniors.
Whoa.
Some of those were their choice. Most of them were my choice. And mainly because I said, look, these are going to be the standards. And I had to be told many times by those kids, well, listen, we've been doing things a certain way here for, 3 years. I don't really think we want to really change for our senior year. And so we went 5-7 that year. It's the only losing season I've had in the last, 15 years of my career, probably 20 years of my career, maybe even longer. Probably the only losing season I've had in 20 years. Had I not removed some of those guys, I would not have that losing season on my record because we'd have probably won another game. We'd have probably won 6 games that year, maybe 7. We'd have won 6 or 7 games in 2014 had I not removed those kids. We would not have won 11 games in 2016, 12 games in 2017, 13 in 2018 had I kept those kids.
Great point.
So I cost myself a couple of wins there in 2014 and put a bad record on my record for that year. But it was one of the main reasons why we were so successful, the years down the road, because that was the culture we established. And those kids that were freshmen in 2014, that were the ones winning 12 and 13 games their junior and senior year, they saw how I treated those kids that acted that way and didn't want to live up to the standard. They saw that. And when they saw that, obviously that made a statement to them that I was willing to get rid of. I mean, I got rid of our probably 2 or 3 best players off that team.
A lot to go to school off of what you just said there. So thank you for sharing that. I know we're winding down here, but just want to kind of hit you with this question. Yeah. What are you looking for in a leader on your team? I also want to add to that. Is there any student leaders, player leaders that you've had in the past that best exemplified that? If you could share an example there, but what are the main attributes you're looking for?
Number one, they have to be the kind of human being that the kids respect. Kids especially, I mean, people in general will not follow people they don't respect. And that has to come from who you are as a person, your work ethic. Those are the main things that person has to have to be a leader. I tell people all the time, if you're a leader and you have no followers, you're just out taking a walk. So the number one thing a leader has to have is followers.
I like that.
So you have to have followers to be a leader, and guys don't follow people they don't respect. So that's the number one thing you have to be, is a person from a character and a work ethic standpoint that the other guys respect to follow. The other part of it is, again, they have to be the kind of people that are willing to serve too. People follow people that they feel like have their best interests. If you're the guy that, does all the little extra stuff, whether it's, cleaning up the locker room or, carrying the bags in after practice, guys will follow people that lead by not people don't want to follow guys who just delegate stuff.
Right.
Just say, hey, go do this, go do that. They
Yeah.
want guys that are in there doing it with them.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've got to be a bit of a servant. You got to be a lot of a servant to be a leader. To sum that up, you got to be someone that's respected because of the kind of person you are, by the work ethic you have, and then you also have to have a servant's heart to be a really true, effective leader. Guys I've had in the past, I tell you, since I've been here, we've had some really good ones. We had a guy last year, Cody Whitmer.
I was gonna bring up him, and then the year prior, he played inside linebacker. Cam
Royal.
I mean, he was one of the best high school athletes in terms of just presence, like leadership presence, and like how he conducted himself.
And Cam was so great at he had a real way of holding people accountable.
Yeah.
I thought that was his best attribute was he wasn't. And listen, holding people accountable, it's tough. That takes a lot of courage. That's another thing leaders have to have is courage, because you have to be willing to I don't know if confront is the right word, but you have to be willing to
little brotherly criticism.
Exactly.
Call it.
Yeah.
Whereas Cody was an encourager. He was a leader by example. He was highly respected by the kids for the human being that he was. He would not leave here any night unless the locker room was clean. He made sure that was done. Cody was probably one of the best ones we've had since I've been here. I had a guy my last year at Myers Park named Parker Mendenhall. Parker was a very, very undersized offensive lineman. Was an Eagle Scout. Just a great all-around kid. Graduated from UNC in 4 years, but was the absolute true definition of a servant. Had kids over to his house. Always had dinners for the offensive linemen. Always made sure that kids' needs were taken care of. And my lasting image of Parker is in 2019, we'd been ranked number 1 in the state all season long. I think we're in the top 50 in the country. We're expected to win the state championship. And we got upset down at Richmond County, 35-32. Just to this day, forget the 3 state championship games I've lost. That loss is the most difficult loss I've ever had. And it ended Parker's career. Parker was not a guy that was going to go play college football. And just had to be utterly devastating for him. Probably one of the toughest moments of his life, quite frankly. And there we are leaving the locker room in Richmond County and kind of just gathering things up. And we're about to walk out, and it's me and a couple coaches. And there was a 2-part locker room. There was a small room and the big room. And we walked out of the small room to walk through the big room to walk out. And there's Parker Mendenhall in the big part of the locker room, sweeping the floor. Sweeping the floor of the visitors' locker room at Richmond County after what had been probably the most difficult loss he'll ever experience.
Well, and I remember you telling me that wasn't easy for like just the atmosphere. Richmond County is historically, like, when you play in Richmond County in high school football playoffs, like, it's tough.
There were 11,000 people there that night. It was tough in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, there's different kinds of guys that have been effective as leaders. There's guys that, I had guys on my state championship team at Bowie that were great, character guys, great work ethic guys. I had a guy, Jeremy Hairston at Lackey, who became a high school head coach himself. Jeremy sometimes, I think, led by fear. He was the big offensive lineman. I think guys, rallied around him because I think they were scared of him sometimes. My son Tyler at Marvin was, again, a guy that was so respected by his teammates that they played great around him because they didn't want to let him down. Drake Maye was like that. Guys had tremendous respect for a guy like Drake to be as great a teammate and as humble and have such great character as he had when he had the world in his hands. Guys played great for him because they appreciated who he was. And I think that, to me, and that's what I tell the other thing to our leadership council, that's what leadership is. Leadership is bringing out the best in the people around you. That's what great leaders do.
Yeah.
They bring out the best. They allow the people around them to be at their best, and true leaders on teams that have great leadership, the people around those leaders play at their highest potential. And that, for me as a coach, that's what I've always been most proud of, is that, we don't win championships every year, but there's very rarely a season that comes and goes where I don't feel like I at least got the most out of our kids.
I don't wish I could add more to it, but I think that summarizes it perfectly. That's incredible. And I think it all comes down to just serving each other. That's that servant leadership is what wins the day. Character, hard work, and through that character, you're serving each other. And whether you're a coach, you're a player. So it's served you extremely well. So sir, my hat's off to you, and I wish you and Clayton football all the success this year. Joey, did you have any other questions? I think that about wrapped it up for me.
That wrapped it up. Congratulations on a great season. And I'm extremely sorry about what you texted me prior to this. So hopefully that's I appreciate with how crazy I'm sure the past 24 hours has been. I appreciate you still hopping on and doing this. So and obviously thoughts and prayers to the student that is going through that. It's absolutely terrible news. So, but wish you all the best this season. I'm definitely going to be down there as much as I can to see a game, and it's incredible what you've done down at Clayton. So it's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. And we got a lot of really, really good people around me, and a really, really good the people that lead me. Our administration and is tremendous here, and this is a great town to coach football, and this is a town that cares about football. And if you were at any one of our big games this year, you saw that, and it's a great place to coach, especially great when you're winning.
Understand. Well, Coach, hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and like Joe was saying, our hearts and prayers for you and your team. We wish you guys all the best this year, and I'll definitely be joining Joey if I can to come see a game, because I'd love to see you guys in action.
Please do. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming on.